Okay, so at this point, we know who it is that we're talking to. We know the messaging that is going to most resonate with them, that's going to break through the noise, capture, hold, and direct their attention. Now it is time to get to one of the most critical and foundational strategies that we will explore in this entire training, and that is mapping the customer journey. When we talk about mapping the customer journey, this really is the essence. This is the foundation of all of your marketing strategy. And the reason that it works and the reason that it's so important is because I'm going to take you back to the role of marketing. Remember, the role of marketing is to move prospects and customers seamlessly and subtly through each stage of the customer journey. Well, how can we do that if we don't know what the customer journey is? So that's what we have to do. But kind of to set this up, I want to take us back to what we talked about in a previous module, and that is this just acknowledgement that yes, sales and marketing have changed. There have absolutely been some changes to channels and technologies and things like that. But the big thing that has not changed and that will never change is humans. All right. At the end of the day, and remember, we talked about this, whether you're B2B or B2C, we're all in the business of H to H. We are all marketing to humans. So, as marketers, it's worth understanding how trust and intimacy, and yes, even influence, is built in human relationships. And fortunately, we don't have to reinvent the wheel on this. There is literally a book written by a pretty smart fellow by the name of Desmond Morris on the topic of human intimacy and how does it happen. It's called Intimate Behavior. And in this book, the zoologist and basically studier of animals, including the human animal, looks into how does intimacy happen between people, right? How does intimacy happen between people? Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning here, a bit of a disclaimer. He's obviously referring to human intimacy. Now, what we're doing in business and marketing may not be, go all the way to full blown intimacy, but I think it's safe to acknowledge that there is kind of a romance at play. So it's worth understanding how does intimacy happen in humans so we can apply that to creating intimacy in business with our prospects and with our customers. Now, Desmond Morris lays out the 12 steps of human intimacy as follows. Number one, there is eye to body. So, the first way that we begin to build intimacy with somebody is eye to body, meaning we see them, we notice them, we find them attractive. This is that initial glance, right? Then you've got eye to eye. This is where we're beginning to make eye contact, right? So first I see somebody, then we make eye contact. What we now have is human engagement, right? I'm not just looking at you, we're looking at one another. Then it progresses on to the third stage, which is voice to voice. Look at us. We're having a conversation. This is actual, not just eye contact. This is real live human engagement. Then we get into hand to hand, meaning shaking their hand, right? We're not just talking, we're actually touching. Then you get into arm to shoulder, right? So if you've ever seen politicians do this when they're kind of out on the campaign trail, you see them, they'll go in for the handshake and then they'll put the hand on the shoulder because they know that this is an intimacy trigger. This shows that this is a more intimate relationship. So hand to hand, then hand to shoulder. Then what we have is arm to waist or back. This is basically a hug, right? So if you're the kind of person who's a hugger and you find that every now and then when you go in to give somebody a hug and they're like, because they don't know you that well, that's because you kind of jumped maybe a little bit ahead. We'll talk more about that later. Then we get mouth to mouth. So a kiss, hand to head. I always thought this one was interesting, right? This idea that you would kiss somebody before you would touch their head or their face. But seriously, think about how weird it would be if somebody just walked up to you and like touched your face. We generally save the face touching to the people that we're most intimate with, that we would, maybe give a little peck on the cheek to. Then you have hand to body, mouth to body, hand to you get the idea, and then all the way into full blown intercourse. Now that's kind of where we're going to leave it because I think at some point, while Desmond Morris's stages can be a little bit helpful in understanding human intimacy, they stop being helpful when you get into the latter stages of business intimacy. But here's the lesson that I want you to understand, and for me, this was the big takeaway from Desmond Morris's work. What he discovered is that the rate of progression through all the 12 stages was not in and of itself determinant of a successful relationship. Let me say that again in a little bit different way. The rate of progression through the 12 stages did not speak to Did people like it or not? In other words, somebody could start at level one. So you eye to body, I see somebody, and then go all the way through to level 12 in one night. And both parties could say, that was great, right? That was a successful intimate relationship. On the other hand, you'll have other couples, other, romantic partners who they could literally take years to go from level one all the way to level 12. And they could also say, hey, that's great. We did it the right way. Again, the point is the rate of progression through the stages was not what was determinant of success. Here's what was. Did you skip a step? All right. Did you skip a step? And specifically, what Desmond Morris found is that if one of the parties skipped more than two steps, that is when the other person really felt violated. I mean, that's when somebody really felt like, oh, this is, this is not good. Now, there's a lot of implications there with human interaction that are kind of beyond the scope of this particular program. But I think the clear lesson is that sequence matters. Okay, sequence matters when it comes to human relationships, when it comes to human intimacy, whether those be romantic relationships or more transactional business relationships. It is important that we acknowledge that sequence matters, that we know what the sequence is supposed to be, and that we don't skip steps. I submit to you that the reason that a lot of actually good marketing fails is because many marketers are doing the business equivalent of proposing marriage on the very first date. Right? Imagine that. Right? You walk up to somebody, you meet him for the first time, eye to body, eye to eye, make eye contact. You walk over to him, you shake their hand, say, "Hey, can I get you a drink? Where are you from? Oh, yeah, I'm from there too. By the way, you want to get married?" That would be completely weird. That would be completely weird to do in romantic relationships. And yet, if you look at most of the customer journeys that are out there, including the ones that people believe should work that don't, they're doing the business equivalent of that. They are proposing marriage, in many cases, not even before they get to a first date. So, when we think about Desmond Morris's 12 steps and the big lesson of sequence, I think it's also helpful to apply at least a few of the early steps and kind of overlay those to business relationships. So when I thought about, Desmond Morris's 12 steps, I realized that, the idea of eye to body, this concept of you need to be seen or you need to see someone else before you have a relationship. Well, that's simply awareness, right? And so, for us, awareness is the first stage in the customer journey. No awareness, no prospect, no customer. All right. Awareness is the critical first step. But awareness alone is not enough. Today, it is easier than ever to give a glance. Today, you can post something online, and guess what? Someone is going to see it. But just because they see it, it doesn't mean that glance is going to turn into a stare. And that's why the second step after awareness is engagement. Okay, engagement. Now, if we're going to go back to Desmond Morris's work, this is making eye contact. This is having a conversation. Maybe it's a handshake. That's what we mean by engagement. Now, in the business world and the marketing world, engagement is going to look like somebody reading a blog post or following you on social, maybe commenting to something, maybe watching a YouTube video, listening to a podcast, opening and actually reading one of your email newsletters, not just seeing an ad, but actually reading and consuming one of your ads, actually clicking on one of your ads. All of these assume that some level of engagement occurred. Now, the third step is the subscribe stage. And this is when you actually get the prospect's contact information and permission to follow up. Now, Desmond Morris did not have this as one of his 12 steps, but I would argue that, hey, can I get your number, is a tried and true phrase and step that has existed in romantic human relationships basically since we all got phones, right? And maybe now it's kind of get your WhatsApp or what's your Instagram? I don't know. I'm not really in the dating scene anymore, but the idea of needing to get somebody's contact information so that you have the ability to follow up, we all intuitively understand that it's essential, right? It's essential for dating and it's also essential for business. So that is the third stage. Okay, so we've got awareness, we have engagement, and we have the subscription. They have subscribed. We have the ability to follow up. Now it is time to really elevate the relationship, right? Because the reality is you can meet somebody and you can have a nice conversation and they can give you their number, but sometimes it's not always their real number. right? I don't know if you've ever, done this before, had this done to you. You ask for somebody's number or somebody asks for your number and you don't give them the real number. Again, the same thing can happen in business relationships, right? Have you ever filled out a form only it wasn't your real email address? Come on, we've probably all done it, from time to time. And so when we're getting subscribers, we want to make sure that they actually want to be there. And then once we have their contact information, now is not the time to say, great, now that I've got your number, want to get married? Okay. What we should do instead is say, hey, that's awesome. What are you doing, tomorrow? I'd love to meet and grab coffee or something like that. Right? The want to meet and get coffee, that is what we refer to as the convert stage. Okay, the convert stage is the critical moment. This is the inflection point in the relationship. This is when a stranger truly begins to become a friend. All right. This is when a prospect really starts to become engaged and starts to take that first step towards becoming a customer. What we're looking for at the convert stage is a micro commitment. Okay, a micro commitment is a small commitment of either time or money. Okay, time or money. Why time and money? Because as humans, that is how we show commitment. We show commitment with our calendars and we show commitment with our wallets. So once we have somebody's email address, the next step is not to get them to make a major purchase. The next step is just to try to get them to make a micro commitment, right? Maybe they registered for a webinar, but did they actually show up for the webinar? Maybe they, requested a consultation, but did they actually show up for the consultation? Maybe they, opted in for a sale that you have going on, but did they make a small purchase, right? They requested a coupon code, but did they make a small purchase? Again, we're not asking for a lot here. We're simply asking for a micro commitment. We're simply asking if they want to have coffee. All right. So we created awareness. We got some engagement. We got their subscription. We got their, contact information and the ability to follow up. We got a micro commitment, meaning they are a convert, right? They are now as close to a customer as you can get without quite being a customer yet. Now, what we want to make sure is that they actually hit the excite stage. The excite stage. This is where you know that they're actually happy that the relationship has gone this far. Okay, this is when you're looking to deliver what we call the aha moment. Now, I'll give you some examples of aha moments later, but in its simplest form, right? Let's take it back to dating and relationships. You succeed in getting this person to meet you for coffee and they actually show up. That means you got a micro commitment of time. Now, while you're there, while you're having coffee, right? How are you going to behave? Right? My guess is you're not going to go, you know what? It's coffee. It's not that big a deal. So I'm not going to. I'm not going to bother like putting on a clean shirt or taking a shower, brushing my teeth or anything like that. What are we going to talk about? I don't know. We'll kind of see where it goes. Never mind. No, that's not how you behave. Not when it's a first date. When it's a first date, even if you're just meeting for coffee, right? You're putting on your best outfit. You've got your funniest jokes prepared. You are dialed in and ready. The same must be said for the very first interaction, for the very first transaction that you have with your customers at the convert stage. If you don't deliver real, meaningful value in advance at that point, guess what? They're not going to be excited. And if they're not excited on the first date, you better believe you're not going to get a second date. Now, this is important because as marketers, we often think that, well, it's not our job. It's not our job to make sure that that first interaction is good. That's the product team or that's our services team. That's where the handoff occurs. This is where I want you to change your mindset. Remember, we talked about how it is now the role of marketing to own the customer journey. So what this means is that it is your job to figure out what is that aha moment and how do we make sure that it's engineered and reinforced. We're going to talk about how to do that, but just know getting the customers excited. Yes, the product must be great. Yes, the service must be great. But at the end of the day, it's going to be your responsibility. All right, let's say they are excited. The beautiful thing is at this point, the rest of the journey kind of becomes a foregone conclusion because if they are excited, then you're probably going to get a second date and then a third and a fourth and a fifth. And next thing you know, it may be completely and totally appropriate to drop down on one knee and do the business equivalent of proposing marriage. This is when we are in the ascend stage. Ascend is the sixth stage, and this is when you are able to make your core offering, right? So think about the thing that you most want to sell, your flagship product, your flagship service, that thing that you just wish everyone would buy, right? This is when you get to make that offer. And then if they buy that, then you can make upsells and cross sells and other profit maximizers along the way. But this is when you make your core offer. It's at step six. And this is really important because, again, let's go back to most customer journeys the way that most marketers design them. Step one, awareness. Step two, ascend, right? Most marketers are jumping from step one, which is, hey, now that you know who I am, buy my stuff, and they wonder why it isn't working. I submit to you that it is because they are proposing marriage not even on the first date, right? The first date, that's step four. They're proposing marriage on the very first interaction and wondering why no one is saying yes. Well, of course, they're not saying yes. And I would also suggest that the people who do say yes may not be the customers that you want. So if you find that you're not getting the types of customers that you want, perhaps it's because your journey is attracting the wrong types of people. Maybe they're, too desperate. Maybe they're uneducated and they don't fully understand your offering. And that's why you have high churn and high refunds. Sequence matters. Don't skip steps. Okay, so we've got the ascension stage. We've got them. We have a customer. Now you may be thinking, great, we're done now, right? We're done. As marketers, we're done. We got the buyer, we got the customer, we're done. Nope. Just like dating shouldn't stop once you're married or in a committed relationship, marketing doesn't stop when the sale is made. And that's why we have stage seven, which is the advocate stage. With the advocate stage, you are communicating, following up with your customers to ensure that number one, they're satisfied, and number two, that they're willing to say nice things about you and your brand. At this stage, we're talking about collecting testimonials and customer stories. Now, these are important not just for ensuring that sales stay sold, they're also important because these testimonials and customer stories get used as content in other aspects of the customer journey. So, for example, you may leverage a customer story to re engage a prospect who's still back in step two, right? Maybe they don't quite believe that it's going to work for them, but you've got the ideal customer story, somebody just like them who this has worked for. So, you tell them that customer story, then you got back in stage seven, you repurpose that. Same with testimonials, can be used to increase conversion rates when they're on order forms at the convert stage and the ascend stage, right? They can be used to send to people who may not be quite excited enough to get them even more excited so they're ready to go. All right. So the advocate stage is great because that's where you're collecting assets that can be used to optimize stages throughout the journey. And then lastly, we have stage eight, which is the promoter stage. This is when you are taking your happy and your successful clients and you are turning them in to your marketing partners. This is when your customers are a brand new source of awareness for you. This is when you're turning your customers into an additional awareness channel. So, those are the eight stages. And the tool that we leverage to map these eight stages is called the Customer Value Journey Canvas, which you should have available somewhere in the resources section. So, if these are the eight stages, let's now begin to think about, what are the different things that we as marketers would do through these stages? And, specifically, what is the customer experience? What is the customer experiencing as they progress through each of these eight stages? Well, going back to the awareness stage, what we have is, the prospect seeing an ad, or maybe they're finding you in search, or they're hearing about you via referral, one of those promoters that you get up there in stage eight. These are all forms of awareness. In the engage stage, this is where the prospect is reading a blog post, engaging with you on social media, watching a video, opening and clicking on email. All of these are signs of engagement or re-engagement, right? Very often, prospects who don't make it beyond a certain point, well, they clearly weren't engaged enough. That's where you see some of the arrows coming back down to the engage stage. If they didn't make it past the excite stage or the convert stage, they need to be re-engaged, right? So all those retargeting, email follow-up, all those kind of things are forms of engagement. For the subscribe stage, we of course have prospects opting in for a special report, registering for a webinar or a consultation, right? Filling out some kind of form, giving you their contact information and permission to follow up in exchange for some kind of value. At the convert stage, this is when a prospect is making a small purchase. This is when they're scheduling a demo. They're making that small commitment of money or that small commitment of time. At the excite stage, this is when the prospect actually gets value from the initial transaction. This is when they have that aha moment. The ascend stage is when they're purchasing your core offer, and then they follow that value ladder all the way up, taking additional upsells, cross sells, and just generally sticking around for a little bit longer. For the advocate stage, this is when a successful, happy customer is giving you a testimonial or a customer story. And again, at the promoter stage, this is when a successful customer becomes your affiliate, becomes your referral partner, becomes a value added reseller. So these are the 8 stages, and this is the process. This is the process that a customer is going to go through that you, as the marketer, are going to need to map and optimize. And the goal at the end of the day is to have multiple value journeys. So just like we had multiple customer avatar canvases for each avatar and multiple core message canvases for the different avatars and the different programs, products and services that you're selling, the same is going to be the case for your customer value journeys. At the end of the day, each business is going to have multiple journeys based on the number of customer avatars that you serve, multiple journeys based on the number of products and services that you sell and how you sell them. But for now, I want you to pick one. What is one primary product or service that you want to sell? What would you put in that stage 6, that bottom area of the rung, your core offer? Pick that. Think about a customer avatar that you would serve who most needs that. And once you've got that in mind, let's move on.